There are forces, unseen, voices that whisper not with word, but with emotions. They twist fear, they shape greed, they bend guilt into chains. These are not the monsters that hide in the dark. They're the ones that wear smiles in daylight. This is 7 powerful covert emotional manipulation techniques. Emotional manipulation can happen at various levels. We have already discussed how fear is a very powerful emotion, but it is not the only one. How about greed? That works just as good as fear. People who are driven by ambition can be easily had with statements such as, "Think of all the money you could make." Such a statement would drive a greedy person over the edge. By the same token, if you're dealing with someone who is overly frugal, a statement such as, "Think of all the money you could save," would hit their sweet spot. The point here is that you need to know the person you are dealing with in order to make your manipulation attempts ring true. So, let's take a look at some emotional manipulation tactics which you could use in a given situation. While blackmail is very common as far as holding damning information on someone, emotional blackmail can be just as damaging. This occurs when the manipulator has some type of control over the victim and then uses this control to extort them. Consider this situation. The manipulator knows that the victim is very insecure about their past. The victim was once an addict and had a stint or 2 in rehab. The manipulator knows that the victim is very concerned about turning over a new leaf and wants to put that past behind them. However, the manipulator threatens to bring up the victim's past every time he or she wants to get something out of them. Now you might be thinking, why doesn't the victim just get away from the manipulator? That is a fair assessment in the vast majority of cases. However, the manipulator that is able to latch onto their victim does so because the victim is in a vulnerable position. That is the main takeaway here. When the manipulator is able to recognize that the victim is in a vulnerable position, they are able to use that against them. So it is important that you recognize if you happen to find yourself in such a position. That way, you can guard against unwelcome attempts. The manipulator may try to inspire empathy and remorse for themselves as a part of this strategy. Both of these feelings are the most effective people can feel, and often are enough to motivate the victim to behave in the manner the manipulator needs. The manipulator will use this to get what they want. They will make use of the empathy and remorse that they generate on others to go along with or support them. Using this form of manipulation is about relying more on the subject's emotions than on their logic. The object constantly faces a risk, primarily in the form of emotional pain and suffering. The manipulator may resort to any maneuvers to trigger feelings powerful enough to compel their target to follow suit, although the target may assume that they support the manipulator out of their own free will. In reality, they are acting as a response to the manipulator's scheme. Intimidation is effective insofar as the target is vulnerable enough to fear the possibility of aggression from the manipulator. Thus, intimidation is nothing more than a threat. The manipulator doesn't necessarily have to act on it. but they do have to be as convincing as possible. Manipulators generally find out what the victim fears most and proceeds to attack from that angle. Whenever the victim reveals their fears, the manipulator is able to latch on and take advantage of such a situation. For example, it is common to see siblings bother each other with items they fear. Let's say that one sibling is afraid of spiders, so another sibling will use this information to get their sibling to do the dishes when it is not their turn. While this may seem childish, it can be a very powerful tool when used correctly. However, there is a catch to it. The manipulator will have to eventually make good on their threats. Otherwise, the victim will soon realize that the manipulator is just talk and no action. In this case, the jig may be up, and the victim by themselves will get rid of the manipulator. This is why intimidating others can backfire. When victims are able to stand up for themselves, the manipulator may be in for a rough time. By the same token, if the victim is powerless to do anything, the manipulator may have an easy go at things. It should be noted that intimidation is based on fear. As such, manipulators need to exploit the inherent fear in their targets. This can be achieved by making overt physical threats or by utilizing psychological tactics, such as blackmail, to exert their influence over their targets. In this tactic, the manipulator knows they have something that others want. It doesn't really matter what it is. What counts is that they have something that others seek. So, the manipulator is perfectly willing to dangle it in front of others and then take it away. When this occurs, the manipulator lays down a set of rules and conditions that the victim must meet if they want to have access to what they have. As long as the victim complies, everything is swell. However, the real kicker is that the manipulator will never actually let the victim get what they want. They only string them along until the victim is eventually exhausted and gives up. Less sophisticated manipulators will give their victims a taste of what they want, in the hopes of enticing them to continue complying with their wishes. This type of technique is used to prey on the emotional needs of a person and is not limited to romantic relationships. This can also occur when a manipulator senses that someone is desperate to make money. The manipulator then uses this need to manipulate the victim with the promise of easy money or a steady income. The victim goes along only to be cheated at some point. This technique is based on a person that pretends to be someone they are not until they get what they want. For example, a person who is interested in gaining something from another may pretend to be romantically interested in this person. The victim, who is desperate for love and affection, will go along with the hopes of entering into a meaningful relationship. The manipulator then gets close enough to their target until they extract the benefit they seek. Once the manipulator gets what they want, they pull the bait and switch, that is, they revert to their true self. Guilt is one of the most powerful manipulation techniques known to humankind. Guilt can be used to manipulate people by making them feel inferior for the help and support they have received at some point, or it can also be used to get others to feel inadequate due to a condition they have. Think of all those times you hear people say, "Things would be different if you weren't sick." That is one of the most rudimentary means of making someone feel guilty, yet it is highly powerful. Also, you may hear others say things like, "Remember when you needed my help? Now I need yours." This is a clear attempt at coaxing someone to go along with the manipulator's intentions. This is very common in the workplace. There are folks who are experts at pinning everything on someone else. For instance, when something goes wrong, the manipulator will find a way to shift the blame to someone else. The ablest manipulators are able to produce compelling evidence against others, thereby clearing their name of any responsibility. Manipulators can play the guilt card or can play the shame card by using morals. They may even go as far as condemning others for their actions in a preemptive attempt to confuse them. For instance, the supervisor on the production line of a company makes a mistake. This costs the company money. When questioned by upper management, the supervisor pins the blame on the employees by claiming a moral high ground. Statements like, "I am an expert in what I do," seeking to create this high ground. This automatically shifts the blame to line workers who may not be considered experts in that particular field. To take that one step further, the supervisor may choose to shame and blame his or her employees. Statements such as, "You guys let me down after everything I've done for you," are rather overt attempts to make others take the blame for something they may not be responsible for. The blame game can happen in relationships, business dealings, and politics. Politicians who find someone else to blame for the problems happening in their country often present themselves as saviors and heroes for their people. They are the ones who have a solution for everything, yet when you drill down on their track record, they really don't achieve much of anything. Another devious technique used to exert undetected mental influence is referred to as insinuation. The innocent manipulator allows what is a deliberately crafted, insinuating statement to elicit an awkward emotional response. If you take offense, they will inform you that it is not what they said. The comment is generally presented as a compliment, but not a very encouraging one. But it is enough veiled to underestimate you. The trainer understands what will annoy you, and he or she will be happy to launch such a grenade and see how the fault lies. Their comments are intended to have various possible interpretations that will cause a lot of hurt and doubt. You may sound plummy or left without a meaningful response if you hear it at first, because it has so many possible interpretations. As an example, your partner smiles and says, "What do you know? As a prostitute, you could make a lot of money." If you question him, he will tell you he intended it to be a joke. But you will keep asking yourself for a long time to come what he meant with this comment. You might ask why, when your friend is speaking with you about prostitutes, and he cares so much about prostitution. Why then he feels this way about you, and how much you ought to bring in the bill you are inclined to give. And you'll also wonder whether he would praise you, like he said, on how good a lover he feels you are. Such remarks will operate on you and will intensify anger, potential disagreements, and partnership instability. It is convenient for the manipulator to make it appear like a mistake, but therein is the clue. The manipulator insists that he or she intended it just as an unintentional compliment joke. So the idea is that typically a compliment will not hurt your emotions, nor will make you wonder for years to come what was its true meaning. Another technique often used by controlling people is that of triangulation. This is an effective tactic in a manipulator's arsenal, in which a partnership is formed between the manipulator, you, and a third party. The main purpose of this is to give the victim a feeling of confusion about how the partnership works, causing the victim to have an intense love for the manipulator, but at the same time thinking about the old lover the manipulator had, the third party, or simply bringing up this third party as someone unexpectedly found, for example at the gym. It is much worse if you create vague, negative correlations between yourself and the third party. Their targets are concerned primarily about fear. When you confront them and inform you that your real problem is your depression and your low self-worth, they will deny involvement with the third party. What is that you were listening before? It is also no exception for the manipulator when using this scheme in a strategic way, to view the third party as their next target. In this context, the state is a term referring to a person's general mood. An example of a strong congruent state is when a person's thoughts, words, and acts are aligned. The law of state transference refers to the ability to transfer an emotional state from one person to another. The person with the balance of power in any particular situation can shift their emotional state to the individual they are communicating with. When used by a dark persuader, this is a powerful concept. If somebody tries to persuade people and understands the law of state transference, they may use a strategy to manipulate their level of control over their target. At the start, the influencer pressures their own state to suit the natural state of their subject. The influencer will then force their state where the subject is, for instance, feeling sad and talking slower than usual in the same format. Therefore, they establish a connection with their subject at a deep, subconscious level. This is another means of establishing rapport. After a state match is done, the influencer begins to subtly change their own state to measure their victim's compliance. For example, the persuader can slightly intensify their tone of voice to see if their target is at the same pace as them. If the victim is showing signs of conformity, it clearly shows that the influencer has reached a hook point. Once a hook point is reached, the influencer is going to change the state of the subject to the state that they want. This could either be nice and positive or angry and negative, depending on the situation that best suits the purposes of the influencer. This approach illustrates the effect of subconscious cues on the success or failure in the process of persuasion. Seven techniques, 7 blades: emotional blackmail, intimidation, bait and switch, the blame game, insinuation, triangulation, the law of state transference. Each one works because they do not ask you to think. They reach past reason, into the tender places where we feel, not plan. They prey on fear, on greed, on guilt, on doubt. Know them, recognize them, guard your vulnerability, for those who know where you hurt will always know how to make you bleed. If you want to learn how to spot these tactics and how to defend yourself, stay with us. There is knowledge, and then there is survival. Hit like and subscribe to learn how to defend yourself.